So about a week ago on the channel, I made a post asking you guys what your most unpopular D&D takes are. Well, today we're going to go ahead and tier rank them. I have done a video like this before, maybe like 6 or 7 months ago, and it was a lot of fun, and it's something that I've always wanted to do again, so here we are. As a reminder, the rankings are not based on how much I agree or disagree with your take. It's really going to be purely based on just how spicy that take is. But I am going to discuss whether or not I think what you have to say is completely insane or not. So with that being said, let's take a look at the tier rankings that we have. There are 5 rankings here. We have Red Dragon's Breath, Fireball in a Small Room, Campfire in a Rainy Night, Cold as a Lich's Hands, and Banished Straight to the Plane of Ice. So with that being said, we're not going to waste any more time. Go subscribe to the channel to help me reach 20k. I'm getting so close, but yeah, let's just get started with our first take. First up, Smiting is a Walled Garden is bad design. All half-casters should have access to this mechanic. We're starting off pretty bold. A lot of the reason that people love Paladins is strictly because of the Smite, but maybe that is inherently bad design. There is definitely something to be said for the fact that it could be a lot more interesting to be able to allow half-casters to do something with a lot of those spell slots, since also those spells tend to be pretty restrictive in nature. Opening up that design to be able to give other half-casters the ability to like juice up their attacks in certain ways is honestly not a terrible idea. I don't really hate it. That said, I can also see a world where some people might not like it as much because they could see that the half-casters would all start to feel pretty samey at that point if they could do it. I don't know that I necessarily agree with it, since a lot of things are pretty samey generally and people aren't that upset about them. But I can definitely see that being like a critique of this take. So I don't think it's super spicy. I think it's at least reasonably hot. So with that being said, I think we're going to go ahead and put this one in Fireball in a Small Room. Yeah, Fireball in a Small Room, because I think people really like the flavor that Paladins have, and I think kind of taking that away and dispersing it to other classes would upset quite a few people, to say the least. Next up is that Warlocks should be able to choose their casting stat to reflect the nature of how everyone's path is unique to following their patron. I don't think that's particularly spicy, and I honestly kind of agree with it. There was one of the UAs, like it was, I don't know, like UA 5 or 6 or something like that, way back when they were doing like the 180 playtest, where this was actually something that was experimented with, where Warlocks got to choose whether their casting stat was going to be Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma. They obviously ultimately went back on that, and now it is just Charisma in the official 2024 release. I think a lot of people were actually a fan of that concept, and it would have been kind of nice to be able to keep that. It would have made Warlocks even more interesting than they already are, and it would have created probably a greater depth for the class to really let people get a little bit more custom with the way that they do it. Would people have probably just ended up picking Charisma most of the time, or Wisdom? Maybe, probably. But it could, but that like coupled with a lot of other design changes that could have happened with 2024 at the time, I think could have been really interesting. I don't think this is a particularly spicy take. I am going to go ahead and I'm going to put that in Cold as a Lich's Hands. I don't think it's that spicy. Next is every table should homebrew to make the rules fit their vision and style. Yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure what else there is to say. I mean, homebrew is kind of like a fundamental, like built-in part of the game. People are going to inherently like kind of change and adapt and do things that maybe they think are a little bit more fun. I do think that this is something that's probably a bit easier said than done, especially if you're like a newer table or a newer group and you don't have a ton of experience with doing these kinds of things. Most people are, fun fact, most people are just not game designers. So this is not the kind of thing that comes particularly easy to everyone. So to just say that everyone should just homebrew stuff to make it better is really inherently complicated. I don't think the take is particularly spicy. I think it's kind of like part of the game. Like in plenty of like the preface of the game, that even tells you like this is something you can do, build on it, make it your own, and do kind of whatever you want with it. So I don't think that the take is particularly spicy, but I do think the advice is potentially challenging in a lot of situations. So, I mean, with that being said, I don't think this is particularly spicy. I'm going to go put that in Cold as a Lich's Hands as well. Next up is opportunity attacks ruin combat excitement. Honestly, I think I pretty largely agree with this take. I even made a video about I made a video about flanking a few months ago. And I talked a lot about opportunity attacks and movement and things like that. And the thing is that opportunity attacks are probably the single biggest thing that holds back like tactical combat and movement and engagement and things like that. People think is, that maybe it should be having additional rules like flanking that reward it, but really it's the one rule that punishes tactical movement. I think that really ruins a lot of the excitement, and opportunity attacks are a huge part of that. So I largely agree with this take. I think there's plenty of other things that could have been done in combat, like have existed in previous editions, to kind of encourage and enable different types of movement and tactical decisions. And opportunity attacks largely just kind of function to kind of strip some of that away. There's some logic to it. It makes sense. It's not the point. That's not what I'm really discussing here. But largely I agree with the take. As for how spicy it is, I think it's reasonably spicy. I think some people just... They love the notion, the concept of opportunity attacks, what they provide and what they do for the game. That makes sense that if someone's running away, I'd be able to hit them. So I think a lot of people would be upset if they were just fully gone, but I think a lot of people also kind of get that they do probably hinder more than they help. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and put this one in Campfire on a Rainy Night. Next is that marshals should get awesome anime-style abilities at higher levels to keep up with casters. Sure. I mean, they kind of do. I mean, like, what, Zealot Barbarians can, like, what, they grow, like, wings and can revive, like, people that have fallen unconscious? Like, so, I mean, in a sense, that some of them probably do, but maybe not in the same kind of way that they're saying. To me, I'm not really sure. I think, yeah, maybe marshals need a little bit of something else at higher levels to make them feel a little bit more competitive. I don't know that they really need like awesome anime style abilities where they're doing kind of completely insane, like unhinged things. I just don't think that that's necessarily the type of game that 5th edition is trying to be. I don't know that it's necessarily a bad thing either. I also really think that like a big part of what martial characters struggle with is really just the availability of options. A lot of times they just get these defined features, they kind of just get more and more and more as they level up, and that's kind of it. There's not really a lot of branching. There's not really a lot of like decisions that you get to make with those, which is the complete opposite of spellcasters. Yes, they have spells that are incredibly powerful, but they also get to make decisions about those spells every single time that they level up and whenever they get access to new spells. So to me, it's more about availability of options rather than just having like a completely insane thing to do. So I get it. I don't think this is also a particularly spicy take. I think I've heard this kind of thing parroted quite a lot of times. So I think this is a fairly cool take as well. So I'm going to go ahead and put this one in Cold as Lich's hands as well. Next is sometimes the DM is wrong and expressing why you think they're wrong is okay. Yeah, I very much agree with this. Sometimes the DM is wrong. DMs make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. I've never professed to be a perfect dungeon master. I don't think I'm anywhere close to. I don't think anyone is a perfect DM. Everyone's going to make mistakes. They're going to forget things, how they apply. They're going to, someone's going to apply a condition and then like 10 seconds later, they're going to completely forget that they applied that condition. This is probably the more about like mechanical rules mistakes, but I mean, the point is that those types of things happen to everyone, and I don't think anyone is like a flawless dungeon master or player or anything like that. The second part of this thing is really what I think the take is, which is that expressing why you think they're wrong is okay. There's definitely a lot of advice that talk about how you should, never interrupt a session. You should always let things kind of happen in between it. Again, I think there's probably a lot of granularity there, depending on how much inherent trust or how much you really feel comfortable with your group and with your table. If you do feel that way and it's a really strong connected group, I don't really think there's anything wrong with taking a few minutes to just discuss something immediately in the moment as it's happening. But if it's clearly getting a little bit heated, it's probably something that's better left to just kind of, roll with something for now and then discuss it later. I don't think you should really necessarily spend like an hour sidebarring just to try and figure out a specific rules interaction that's going to happen like one time. That said, it's definitely something that I've done plenty of times with my friends in other games, not like D&D specifically, but in other games we've had plenty of long form discussions about crazy nuanced rules. So if that's the part of the take that I'm gonna judge, which is expressing why you think they're wrong, is okay. I think it's spicy-ish. You see a lot of discussion to the complete opposite. Like, you should never really do this. So I don't know if I'm willing to put that in even as high as Fireball in a Small Room, but I am gonna go ahead and put it in Campfire on a Rainy Night. Next up is Wild Shape is a mechanical nightmare that absolutely no one, especially the devs, will acknowledge. Yeah, it's completely screwed. I mean, I have gone on record plenty of times about saying how I find Wild Shape in its current iteration, or at least the iteration that it had in 2014, was extremely problematic. It was complicated. It was not, I don't want to say it's confusing, but like it was a lot harder than it necessarily needed to be. It was very burdensome on players. It required them to utilize a book that they would never otherwise have any reason to, that being the monster manual, dig through all kinds of stat blocks, like hundreds in some cases, to be able to figure out which creature that they wanted to be, which beast that they wanted to be. I think it was honestly just a bad implementation of it. 2024 has changed it. They streamlined it to make it a lot easier, but it still fundamentally has the same like core problems that it used to. I was a huge advocate of the wild shape templates, something that I got absolutely shredded for in the past. I've said this before and I'll say it again. That is still by far my most disliked video on my channel, and it's not even close. The video where I said that wild shape templates were conceptually a great idea. Again, the execution of them was horrendous. It was really bad, but I think the concept, what they represented, what they brought to the game was overall excellent, and I think they could have made wild shape a really seamless, incredibly easy to use feature if they had some like modules that you could be add or remove and put onto the different templates. So I firmly agree with this take, and this is an interesting one because it's definitely evolved over time. At the point where I made that video, I was like borderline outcast from the community for daring to be a heretic and say that wild shape was not perfect as is. So at the time, people absolutely hated templates. I loved it. A couple people did as well, but it was community-wide. It was absolutely despised. And I think a lot of people just misplaced that rejection of how bad the templates were, and they kind of conflated that with just the concept of templates. And I think that's where a large part of that problem came from. Over time, I think a lot more people have come to realize that the template idea was honestly pretty good. It was just that it was badly executed. So right now, at this moment in 2025, I don't think this is a particularly spicy take, but I don't think it's like super cold either. So this is going to go in Campfire and a Rainy Night as well. Next is that all classes should have access to unique reaction abilities that are on par with Silvery Barbs. That's pretty bold, to say the least. Now, we take it in chunks. There's two parts here. I do think that all classes should have access to unique reaction abilities. I think reactions are underutilized, but I do think that there is like a good design reason for that. The more reactions you introduce, the slower the pace of play can tend to become. Every single time there's an opportunity for a reaction, despite the fact that you're only getting one, it increases with every single player at the game. If you have 2, 3, 4, 5 players, you have now 2, 3, 4, 5 opportunities for reactions every single round. And yes, that is still technically the case currently. You can always have, like, someone could always be making an opportunity attack, or someone could be casting Silvery Barbs. There's tons of things that do proc on reactions, but there's not a lot. And I don't think that was a mistake. I think that is intentional to kind of keep the pace of play flowing, so you don't have people always being like, oh, I can do this, oh, I can do that, oh, you're going to use yours, I'm going to use mine, or we'll use them together, blah, blah, blah. It can create like a bit of a mess kind of in the middle of the combat. It's probably not something that you necessarily want to be dealing with all the time. So I think it would be interesting. It would be a cool design space to explore a little bit more, probably not too much more. It's something that they would have to be kind of careful about. All classes should have access to them, especially on par with Silvery Barbs. That's I think that's probably the part that makes this pretty spicy. Silvery Barbs is especially potent in tons of situations. Now, obviously not saying everyone should just get a spell that is Silvery Barbs, but like a power level kind of similar to that. So I think that part is probably what's going to push this up into Fireball in a Small Room. Next is that it's what my character would do as a perfectly valid explanation or excuse to do something in the game. Honestly, yeah. I mean, I largely agree with this take as well. I do think it's true. Like, if people say something and they do something that is kind of detrimental or potentially problematic for the team, but it's actually what that character would do, and this person has made a habit of like actually genuinely trying to make an effort of embodying who their character is and the way that they exist in the world and interact with it. And it's not just like a random one-off because they want to like hurt their party or just kind of be a dick for some reason. I think that is a totally legitimate thing to say. It's kind of a meme. It just is what my character would do. And then you just do something completely insane. And so there is that aspect of it, and people use it as a justification to just sort of like ruin someone else's day. And like, I'm super not here for that. But if the people in the group are actually playing and embodying their characters in the way that they want to, and that's the type of table and type of game that exists, and it might have some kind of negative impact, I actually think that's pretty cool. And I've had experiences like that at our table too, where people will make a decision that is kind of like suboptimal, but it's because it's the way that their character would play, and they are actually making the concerted effort to play in that way and engage with the game, not as the person, but as the character. So I think this one is going to be reasonably spicy because I think a lot of people hate the justification. I'm going to go ahead and put this in Fireball in a Small Room as well. Next is that Counterspell is not too strong of a spell in 5th edition. I mean, I guess it kind of depends on what you're looking at. In 2014, it was obviously significantly stronger. In 2024, it's definitely nowhere near as powerful as it was. I've said it a bunch of times as well in different videos that like a lot of the things that used to be spells in the game have been transposed onto actions that enemies can take. So counterspell doesn't really affect them anymore. And then especially the fact that it is now tied to a Constitution saving throw does make it significantly less like immediately and obviously potent than it used to be. So I don't think counterspell is exceptionally strong currently in 2024. I still think it's a pretty good spell. There's not really another way to kind of get that kind of effect, which definitely makes it on the stronger side because it's relatively unique in that aspect. I think if this was 2014, it would have been a particularly hot take, very spicy indeed. But given that we are in the context of the new 2024 Player's Handbook, I don't think this is actually a particularly spicy take. I'm going to go ahead and put it in, honestly, Cold as Lich's hands. We're not going straight to the plane of ice, at least not quite yet. I say at the bottom that it's boring in their opinion because when it does work, it just makes nothing happen, which is not exciting. I kind of disagree with that. I think there is like this kind of very exciting moment that can happen when someone is about to cast a counterspell, especially now with like the rolls and the saves. Does it work? Does it not work? It can suck, but I don't think that is necessarily not exciting. I can see how the two things could be conflated, but feeling bad and not being exciting are kind of two separate things. Next is Silvery Barbs is an average first level spell. I mean, I think everyone knows where this is going. No, I mean, like, Silvery Barbs is very obviously an incredibly powerful spell. It creates such a significant shift, being able to impose this retroactive disadvantage and then give someone advantage for the cost of a single first level spell slot. At the levels that you initially get it, sure, it's maybe not the best. There's probably other better things that you could do with that single spell slot or two spell slots that you probably have. But as you level up, it's interesting because it's a first level spell slot that scales incredibly well. Because the more first level spell slots or the more lower level spell slots you have available to you, the more it becomes like functionally free in a sense. Like, there's not really a whole lot of opportunity cost to using your first level spell slots when you've got like 5, 6, 7 third level or lower. It feels a lot less significant to have to burn it. So this to me is obviously a very spicy take, and I definitely disagree with it. So this is going to be our first Red Dragon's Breath. Next is that the rules as written for damage from critical hits are better than the common variants until at least 5th level because they're less swingy. As long as 5% of all attacks are crits, less swingy benefits players. So I guess there's like two different parts to this. I guess it kind of depends on how you want to look at it. If the first thing that they're saying is that the rules as written for crits are just better than the common variants, I mean, sure, that's kind of an opinion thing. Depends on what you like it. Whether you like it or not. I think that's reasonably spicy on its own. I think a lot of people don't particularly like it. But that said, it did run a poll and it was kind of like, it was kind of split. So, but the second part here is what I don't really understand because it says that the standard rule is less swingy. And that is like, I mean, for the most part, that's not really the case for a lot of the variants that I've heard, especially probably the most common one, which is the like the crunchy crits rule, where you start with the max roll of the die and then roll one more time. That is significantly less swingy in a sense. I mean, now again, I guess we're looking at two different ways of quantifying or qualifying swingy. If it means swingy, like it will create larger swings in the hit, then yes, like crunchy crits is more swingy in that sense. But there's way less variance in it. If you're rolling 2 dice for your crits, you could end up with, double ones and getting a 2, but you can also end up with, like, I don't know, double 10s and ending up with 20s. Like, there's a lot of swinginess in that is incredibly variant. There's incredibly variable. So it really depends, again, on what they really mean by it's less swingy. That part I don't particularly understand. So anyway, like I said, I think overall the take is kind of reasonably spicy-ish, so I'll put it in Campfire on a Rainy Night. Next is that multiclassing should be banned until your table has completed at least 2 level 12 plus campaigns. Teamwork is way better than whatever your multi-class abominations can do. I mean, this is a very, very spicy take. It's also kind of funny, I'm not gonna lie. There's no, like, I don't know how you track that. Like, does one person need to have completed the level 12 or like everyone in the group has needed to play at least twice the level 12 plus? It reminds me of like some of the games, like I'm sure there's a ton, but the first one that jumps to mind is Gloomhaven, where you kind of like you play and you unlock new characters as you play. I I mean, like, I don't know how you sort of adjudicate this or like why it's specific that multi-classing would be the thing that you gate behind completing 2 level 12 plus campaigns, just forcing people to monoclass until they've done that. I get it, like, it can be complicated, but if someone wants to do it and they want to put in the work to kind of figure it out and understand how it works, even if they are a relatively new player, I don't think that they should be prevented from doing it, especially because of how long a lot of times it can take to get to level 12 plus. So, I mean, I definitely don't agree with this, and I think this is a very spicy take, so I think this is going to end up in Red Dragon's Breath as well. Next is that high-level D&D isn't bad. I very strongly agree with this take. I have played a couple of, or run actually, a couple of high-level campaigns. I ran one that went, I've talked about it before, went over 4.5 years. We ran it straight to level 20. We played another one that went to like, I don't know, level 14, 15, something like that. And it's definitely not bad. I don't think high-level D&D is bad at all. It is challenging, but I don't think that challenging and bad necessarily overlap. Challenging things can be bad and bad things can be challenging, but they don't necessarily overlap. Two things can be true. So high-level D&D is a little bit more complicated. It takes a lot more effort from both the player and the DM. The types of challenges and things that you need to throw at your players kind of have to scale a lot. It's less about the small skirmishes and more about these like giant, like, you know, universal or like global kind of conflicts that they need to be able to resolve. So I don't think a lot of people are sufficiently prepared to play high level D&D, and that is to a large extent it's kind of the fault of the game, because they don't really the DMG and the player's handbook, because there's not really a lot of tools that help to support those kinds of things or to explain how they can be done and done effectively. So like there's probably a lot of open space there for the team to kind of really hone in and help make the higher level experience better. But I think this is a spicy-ish take, because a lot of people do just say that high-level D&D is insane, it makes no sense, and no one should ever do it. But I don't think it's anything particularly crazy. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on Campfire on a rainy night. Next is that defense is more important than offense, and that having a high AC is better than how much damage you can do. This is complicated. Again, it kind of like depends on what they mean by better in that sense. There's definitely like a strong correlation between the two as well, because the longer you're staying alive, the more damage that you can also do. So, I mean, there's that. But I think what it comes down to for a lot of people is that like dealing damage is on average going to be a lot more fun than just not taking damage. That said, there's definitely some like, you can get a nice little smirk on your face from when your DM tries to hit you with like a 22 and you're like, no, it doesn't hit. So there is a lot of stuff for that. Being able to consistently make your saving throws, it does feel good, but in my experience and from what I've seen from other people that I've played with and discussions that I've had with other players, they like to be more kind of active in the thing. They like to do the thing. And when you're doing the thing, that's oftentimes when you're rolling dice for damage or trying to hit or trying to cast spells, trying to do all kinds of crazy things. So like being more offensive tends to be more fun in that sense. So whether or not it's better it's a bit more challenging. Given the sort of like bent of the community towards optimization, like specifically like damage output optimization, I think this is kind of a spicy take. So I'm going to go put this one in Fireball in a Small Room. Next is that opportunity attacks against allies are a rules exploit, and proponents of this are weasels. I feel personally attacked. I did make a video about this where I kind of went over it, and then it turned into that whole like reaction meme fiesta. I very obviously disagree with this person based on my conclusion that I came up with that I had in that video, where I don't think there's anything exploitative about this at all. I don't think there's anything even close to exploitative about this. Like, we're not even in the same realm. There's so much that you have to do, so much has to work. And yes, if you wanted to, you can exploit it, but you can say that about just about anything. So this is not something that is unique to this. I think especially the second part, anyone who thinks it's our weasels, I think we're going a little bit far. And even I take myself out of the equation. I don't think we should be doing that. I don't think we should be really casting that much aggression onto other people. So opportunity attacks are rules exploits, and proponents of it are weasels. I think this is a challenging one to evaluate because, again, it was so polarized in the initial poll. So I don't even have a good gauge of how spicy or not this is. Now, obviously, the designers have come out in the Dungeon Dudes video. They did say that this is not necessary. It was like the removal of the word hostile was not intended to allow this, but also that there's nothing wrong with it. That is, rules as written, it does totally function, and it's not a problem, and that even they would probably use it in their games because it can allow for a lot of really cool, really fun and exciting moments. So based on the fact that they have confirmed that it is not an exploit, I think it's going to bump it down. I was probably going to put it into not Fireball. I was probably going to put it in Campfire on a Rainy Night, but I'm probably going to put it into Cold as a Lich's Hands, given that the designers have weighed in on it at this point. Next is to just allow your players to break or abuse the rules. It's a heck of a lot more fun. I don't know about that. I think there's a lot to be said for allowing players to have some liberties with the rules. I'm a big proponent of the rule of cool. I think it's a lot of fun. I do, generally speaking, play fairly close to raw. I don't do all kinds of crazy things, but I do like the rule of cool, letting people do fun, silly things for the moment that makes sense. I'm kind of here for that. Abusing is kind of where it turns into potentially problematic. It's really, I guess, in the nature of how they are abusing it and the kind of table that you're playing at. If everyone is super down to just kind of do insane things and they just kind of want to see how far they can bend and push things, then sure, by all means, go. You do you, king. But I don't really know that this is necessarily broadly good advice. Especially with the word let your players abuse the rules, because a lot of times that can come at the expense of other people at your table who might not be as open to it. So if you are constantly being able to use and abuse the rules in ways that feel like they're really stretching the limits and they're kind of crowding out the effectiveness or the fun or the enjoyment of other people at your table, I don't think that's so great. So, and a lot of people, I think, would generally agree with that. So I think this is a pretty spicy take to some degree. Obviously, homebrewing, we're kind of removing the concept of homebrewing rules in this case, because they're literally saying to people just completely abuse them, which isn't just changing them. It's seeing what is there and just pushing it to its absolute extreme. So I think it's a fairly spicy take. This is going to go ahead and end up in Fireball in a small room. Next up is there are other games, and some of them are really good. I'm going to shamelessly plug my second channel, Tabletop Trends. Go check it out. I'll leave a link probably if I don't forget. Yeah, absolutely. There are a ton of other games to play that are not 5e, and a lot of them are a ton of fun for completely different reasons than 5e. I don't know why we seem to have this kind of pervasive thought that there needs to be this one monopolistic force in this monolith game that exists, that something has to step up and be the D&D killer. I don't really understand that because it implies that there always must be this monolithic force in the industry. I don't think that's a thing. I don't think it should be a thing. I think we should just have other games. People should just be able to play different games because they like different games for different reasons. Nothing has to be strictly better than another game. You can just say, oh, I prefer this about D&D, or I prefer this about Daggerheart, and that's totally fine. I think it's a pretty base take. There's other games. Some of them are really fun. I wish it wasn't kind of spicy. There's a lot of people who push back. I've seen plenty of comments on my channel where people would get aggressively mad that someone would even dare consider play another game and everything else sucks. So because I know that those people exist, I'm going to put it in Cold as the Lich's Hands. We're not going to banish it straight to the Plane of Ice, but it's going to be Cold as the Lich's Hands. Next is that Weapon Mastery added very little to the game. It gave martial characters a little bit more power and functionality, but it didn't really do anything meaningful to change the game, and it kind of introduced some different ways to slow it down. So I largely agree with this. When they first initially released the Weapon Masteries, I kind of was underwhelmed by it. For largely the same reason that they said. It doesn't really meaningfully change anything. You're going to do it. If you have it, you're probably just going to do it 99 times out of 100. So there's not really a lot of interesting mechanical things that it kind of brought to the game. It allowed you to do more things, which is cool, but now it just became a new default. So it's not particularly interesting or particularly exciting. I do think they're good. I think they are a great addition to the game. I'm happy that we have them, but I do think that they could have done a lot more. But again, probably not in the context of 5e. They wanted to keep the game relatively streamlined. Whether it slows down the game or not, I don't really think that's really that big of a deal. I think a lot of people say that, but honestly, I don't think it slows down the game any more than anyone who's got any spell ever. I don't think it's really that big of a deal. So I'm not really going to consider that part. But I do agree that Weapon Masteries added very little to the game. I don't even think that's a particularly spicy take. They added functionality. They made weapons better. They made martial characters a little bit better. But there's not really a lot that's meaningful about it. And I firmly agree with that. We're going to put that in cold. I'm considering the Plane of Ice for this take. But I think a lot of people just like really love, you know what? No, I'm going to put that in straight to the Plane of Ice. I both agree with it. And I don't think a lot of people, like if they actually read the full context saying that they're not anything meaningful, I don't think a lot of people would disagree with that. So I'm going to put that in the Plane of Ice as well. Next is that a GMPC is perfectly acceptable and can be fun. I think this is a very, very hot take. I think a lot of people absolutely hate the idea of a GMPC. I'm not even sure where I stand on it, to be completely honest. Like, it's complicated to have a GMPC because part of like one of the conceits of the game is that like the player character doesn't necessarily know everything. But if you're the GM, you know everything, and then you're also running a player. So that's hard. And it can be really hard to just pretend that you don't know things that you do. And then it's like any decision that you make is kind of like you're either intentionally misleading your party or you are intentionally leading your party away from something that's dangerous. So there are ways to do it, like absolutely, and it probably requires a lot of skill to be able to kind of execute it in a good way. In general, I don't think this is something that's particularly great for most tables, though it is something that is certainly possible and you can pull off. Overall, I think I'm gonna honestly, this is probably a straight Red Dragon's Breath. Like that's a spicy take. That's Red Dragon's Breath. Next up says the best way to play 5e is by using the 3 2014 core rulebooks as close to raw as possible and without feats or multi-classing. I mean, technically, they were optional rules in 2014, so I guess that would be as close to raw as possible. I think that's incredibly spicy, and I don't think a lot of people would agree with that either. Generally speaking, a lot of people seem to be pretty in favor of the upgrades that 2024 D&D brought to the game. No, it's absolutely not perfect. No one's pretending that it's not. It's certainly not me. But by and large, it was a pretty significant improvement to the game. If they, especially with monster design, the 2024 monsters are just so much better. It's not even close. I hard disagree with this take, and I think a lot of people would too. I'm not gonna say it's bad. I can certainly see a subset of players who would absolutely agree with this and love to play strictly that way, and probably still do, and refuse to accept 2024 D&D, and that's fine. I do think that is a minority of people, because for better or worse, I do think that it is or whether you agree or not, rather, I do think it's still an improvement. I'm gonna put that in, Red Dragon's Breath. And finally, we have there is no non-roleplay reason to play a non-caster. What? I'm not even sure I understand. I'm not even sure I understand this take. There's no non-roleplay reason to play a non-caster. So I guess what they're saying is that like every non-caster class is so much worse than a caster class that there's absolutely no reason to play it unless you had a particular character in mind. I don't even know what to say. This feels like a ludicrous thing. It almost feels like it feels like spicy for the sake of being spicy, almost. Like, I don't even understand it. Like, there are so many reasons. And now it's like, what do you mean by roleplay? Like, do you count just, like, fun as roleplay in this? Like, because, like, I particularly enjoy playing martial characters. I think it's really fun to get, like, super up close and personal, get in combat, and like, start swinging my sword, even if it's 4 times. I know they're going to say, well, you can be a blade singer, then you're a caster, and you can still do it. But, like, I don't like my particular flavor of fantasy that I find the most enjoyment out of is honestly not casters. I really like just being a strict martial character. I think it's a lot of fun. So, but again, do they count just personal enjoyment as roleplay? So I don't know. I disagree with that. I don't think that there is. You just have to always be playing the best thing to have a reason to play that thing. So I firmly disagree with this take, and I also think a lot of people would as well. I don't think I'd be alone in that. So again, that's going to be another one that's going to go straight to Red Dragon's Breath. We had quite a few Red Dragon's Breath to end this one off. Anyway, so that is it. That is my full tier ranking of some of your hottest D&D or most unpopular D&D takes. So let me know in the comments what you think, where you might have shifted some of these if you want. If you enjoy this type of content, this type of video, let me know in the comments, because there's something that is a lot of fun to do. And there were so many comments on this post. So let me know if you enjoyed it, but otherwise, take care.